In 2 miles, take exit 19 for Valley Park Drive South. Siri chirped from my sister's phone. Charlotte, mute that thing. I know where I'm going. Do you, though? It's been, 20 years, Mark? Please, like I could ever forget the way to Adventure Valley. Seriously, we spent every summer of there it is. I veered briefly across the center line as Charlotte threw her arm in front of me, pointing out the window with childlike excitement. There's Adventure Valley. Oh, wow, which ride is that? The coaster? It used to be Steel something, right? No, wait. That's Mayhem Mountain, isn't it? I carefully nudged her arm back to her seat. I couldn't really blame her. I was struggling to hide my own excitement. It felt like a flashback to our childhood, us screaming and bouncing around in the back seat of our parents' old car as the first glinting steel and timber of the park's rides rose above the trees. That's the Steel Viper, I told her. Mayhem Mountain's over on the far side, and that wooden coaster there, that's Excalibur. Oh yeah, I remember those. I was too scared to try the Viper, but I rode the hell out of Excalibur. Well, Charlotte, you're a grown-up now. I think it's time to conquer the Viper. As long as it's passed inspection and cleared to open, I'm game. That was the real question, wasn't it? We didn't know which rides were approved yet and which weren't. I silently hoped Mayhem Mountain had made the list. I'd left Brandon a bunch of voicemails asking about it. He was overseeing everything. But considering how quickly things were moving since we acquired the place, I couldn't blame him for being hard to reach. If you'd told me at 12 that my wild, hyper-loudmouth friend Brandon Decker would someday graduate cum laude from Northwestern Business School, I'd have laughed in disbelief. Brandon? No chance. Tyler, maybe. But Brandon? Never. Honestly, I think part of why he even pursued a business path was because of Adventure Valley. When the park shut down back in '89, Brandon gathered us in his basement and, with a seriousness I've never seen in him before or since, he made us swear an oath. At the time, it felt like the most important vow a bunch of 12-year-olds could ever take. Riding the high of another epic summer at Adventure Sun Valley, we pledged, like it was some official government proceeding, that one day we'd join forces and buy Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Naturally, our original plan had been to buy the park and ride the coasters until they collapsed beneath us. We made detailed lists of which classmates we'd allow inside and which bullies we'd permanently ban from the entrance. It always felt like the park was ours, so it only made sense that we should own it. It took 2 full decades, but we finally kept our word. With Brandon's relentless motivation and a hefty pledge of assets from Tyler, the bank finally approved our multi-million-dollar loan to purchase, renovate, and reopen the amusement park. The sheer weight of the debt split among the 6 of us kept me tossing and turning for weeks. How would we ever make money from this place? It had shut down ages ago, operating at a loss for years. Back in the late 1980s, the county had seen a disturbing rise in runaway teens and people disappearing. Tension gripped the whole area, leaving folks anxious and distrustful of one another. It absolutely devastated park attendance, but the moment those gleaming coaster tracks peeked over the treetops, I nearly forgot all my financial panic. This was Adventure Valley, for crying out loud. If we unlocked the gates, surely the crowd would return. There, right there. That's our turn, Charlotte shouted. I veered off the highway and took a left beneath the overpass. Less than a mile onward, the wide spread of the parking lot came into view on our right. We swung into the entrance and cruised all the way up to the front by the gates, where a few other vehicles were already parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, a vintage Chevelle, and a Honda Civic, another rental like our own. "Looks like we're the last to arrive," Charlotte observed. She was spot on. As we slid into the spot beside the Lexus, I spotted a small gathering of people waving at us near the ticket windows. "Oh man, is that Tyler? Wow, he's lost a ton of weight. He's so slim now. And Brandon's hairline is seriously retreating. Wait, holy crap, is that Koji? Koji's a total heartthrob now. Simmer down, Paris Hilton. These are my childhood friends. Hands off. Same rules as when we were 15. Anyway, most of them are married." "Which ones?" I gave Charlotte a look, raising one eyebrow and smirking in disbelief. Somehow, my younger sister had never grown out of crushing on guys. "Hold up, who's that?" Charlotte asked as we stepped out of the car. "What?" "That's Scott. You know Scott." "Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same." The woman standing with him. "Oh, I'd put this off for so long I had honestly forgotten to mention it to her altogether. That's Danny, Scott's partner." "Danny? As in Danielle Bircher?" "Yep." My sister shot me a look so harsh you'd think I'd sold her out to the enemy. But it didn't last long, quickly melting into a wicked little grin. "Fine by me. I doubt she's still the same girl from back in school. We're all grown now, right? Let's get moving." I let out a quiet breath and slammed the door shut, trailing Charlotte toward the front entrance. Even though I saw most of these folks every year, standing here with all of them in front of Adventure Valley's gates stirred up a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. Mark, freaking Lantis. Unreal. Tyler's voice still had that sharp, commanding tone, the kind that probably made junior execs trip over themselves. But to me, it was all bark and no bite. I knew him like kin. His attitude just cracked me up. I know, right? I laughed, pulling him in for a hug and a backslap. Back at the gates again. $15 a day doesn't sound so crazy now. 15 a day, my foot, Brandon muttered, shaking his head. The way I see it, we'll be charging closer to $65 a ticket. I'll pay it, Charlotte chimed in with a grin as she gave Koji a quick squeeze. Are folks really going to shell out $65 a pop? Koji asked. I mean, Disneyland's only $85, and they've got 2 parks. Don't remind me, Brandon groaned. One of our backers works for the Mouse. Too bad they won't let you design anything here. Oh, come on. I'm not a designer. I'm an engineer. Don't you mean Imagineer? Charlotte teased, throwing him a wink. Koji chuckled and shook his head. Yeah, okay, I guess I do. While Brandon and Charlotte playfully ribbed Koji, I drifted toward the edge of the ticket booth, where Scott and Danny were chatting. I couldn't figure out why Scott was acting distant. Maybe it was tied to the money. Out of all 6 of us, he had the least to pitch in. Working at his father's repair shop hadn't made him rich. I thought maybe guilt was making him quiet. But as I watched him leaning casually, eyes lazily flicking about, I realized money had nothing to do with it. Scott was high, classic Scott. Hey there, Burnout. Brother, it's been what, 15 years? Give me some love. Scott laughed and stepped off the wall to give me a fast hug. Yo, how have you been, man? Dang, look at you. What's your meal plan, huh? Lettuce and celery, No way you're pulling dates with that twig frame. Your mom doesn't seem bothered. Hey, Mark, I'm Danny. Do you remember me? Danny Bircher? Scott's girlfriend offered a modest smile and extended her hand, prompting a slightly awkward handshake. I think so. Weren't you in the same grade as my sister? That's right. Danny had the grace to look a little uncomfortable. Yeah, though we weren't exactly close. That's sugarcoating it, I thought. We were freshmen when you all were seniors. Yeah, I do remember now. Might as well get this over with. I waved Charlotte over, and though the reintroduction between her and Danny was a bit stiff, it wrapped up quickly, to everyone's relief. All of us were eager to get inside. It felt strange not lining up for tickets, and even stranger bypassing the rusted gate turnstiles. A quiet thrill hit me. We owned this place now. Brandon took the lead and walked us through the park. Not the layout. We all knew that by heart. But his vision for what it would become. The Excalibur is going to need the biggest overhaul, according to Rich, my lead contractor. A wooden coaster left out in the weather this long? We'll preserve whatever original structure's still safe, but odds are we'll need to rebuild the bulk of it. Do we even have the budget for that? Scott called out from where he strolled behind us with Danny. We do, Tyler replied. Oh, look at you, Mr. Deep Pockets. That used car empire treating you that well? I jabbed his shoulder with mine. Tyler staggered, but managed to stay cool enough to shove me into a churro cart. Those 6 BMW lots are more than generous. They've backed most of our financing, Brandon added. Just then, Charlotte dashed up behind us and threw her arms around Tyler and Koji. Can we go on something already? Are you serious? That's the whole reason we're here. I'm here for Mayhem Mountain, I said, clapping and rubbing my palms like a kid. Brandon threw his arms in the air. Fine. I thought you'd be curious to see where your money's going. Yeah, what we care about is returns. And more importantly, which rides passed inspection. Oh. Brandon halted, trying to look annoyed, and failing, cracked a grin. A bit more than half are safe to ride. Everyone suddenly spoke over each other. Is Viper still running? Yep, that one's good to go. How about Snapdragon? That one's ready too. Renegade Falls? No water running yet. High Roller? Yes. Space Spin? Definitely. Power Tower? Inspection scheduled for this week. There was only one attraction I really cared about, the one Brandon and I always cherished. What about Mayhem Mountain? Yes. His reply was met with a chorus of groans. That coaster had always been our go-to. The others were always more than content to ride High Roller and Snapdragon until they dropped. Brandon and I always broke away near closing time to ride Mayhem Mountain until the sky darkened. Ugh, that ride sucks. It's insanely boring. I literally helped design something like that for Disneyland Hong Kong. We stuck it in Fantasyland. For crying out loud. Hey, it's a great ride. It's long, and it flips you upside down. Charlotte won't even get on it. I'm not scared of it. It just freaks me out. There's just, I don't know, something's weird about it. All right, here's the plan. We'll begin at this side of the park and slowly make our way toward the far end. That way we hit every ride that's past safety, including Mayhem Mountain and Snapdragon, Tyler added, and everyone nodded in agreement. Yes, every single ride. And obviously we can ride them like as often as we want. Oh yeah, man. Koji smacked Brandon's hand in a loud high five, and we all strolled toward Space Spin. Making our way through the park took ages, in the best way. Everyone insisted on going on each ride more than once. One of us always had to stay behind in the control booth to run the thing. Within a couple hours, I had already forgotten I was a full-grown man of 35. Being here again, dashing through the old waiting lines with my buddies, fighting over who gets front seat, it was like childhood again. Even so, I couldn't help but glance constantly past the rooftops in the distance. At the park's far edge stood the tall, glinting tracks of Mayhem Mountain, shining in the full sunlight. No one would be debating who got the first seat on that one. That was reserved for me and Brandon. It had always been ours. Charlotte, Tyler, and Koji behaved the most like excited kids, always racing ahead and squabbling over what to ride next, shouting questions back at Brandon about what rides had been greenlit. Brandon and I trailed slightly behind the rest, tossing around new ideas and brainstorming upgrades for the park. Scott and Danny brought up the rear, quietly chatting and lighting up. When we reached the Enterprise, a basic ride that involved spinning cars on a circular track, I volunteered to operate the switch, while the others enjoyed the ride. The Enterprise had always made me feel nauseous as a kid. Brandon offered to stay with me at the platform and keep me company while everyone else went for a ride. I flipped the switch to start the ride, and as the cars pulled away from the loading area, the sign for the Enterprise came into view. I exhaled a long breath. All day, I had been trying to ignore the bright graffiti scattered across the park, but the words painted over the Enterprise's sign were impossible to miss. Where did the missing kids go? And the rest of the graffiti in the park wasn't much different. Most of it read things like, "Where are they, Runaway Row? Find Ryan Kinski," and "Missing or Dead Now." I'd seen similar messages in towns, spray-painted across several crumbling buildings in the industrial district. Brandon glanced at the sign but avoided looking at it too long. I could tell it was bothering him, though. "Do you think that's why they shut the park down? I mean, do you think it could be a problem for the park workers?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Brandon was silent for a few moments as he waited for the ride to slow down, so he could flip the switch again. "Nah, I don't think so. Usually, low attendance isn't what shuts a park down." "Really? That surprises me." "Nope. When we were negotiating for the park, I got access to its financials from the 80s. "So they weren't operating in the red?" I asked, surprised. "Oh, they were. But this place has been losing money since it opened in the 70s. Half of their revenue was going back into something called county services. No one really knew what that was." "The bank couldn't tell you?" I asked. "They couldn't, and trust me, I tried to find out." "County services?" "Yeah, it's really strange. The paperwork says the park closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore. He couldn't be bothered to wait for a good offer on the property, so he just sold it back to the bank for almost nothing. So, he was a rich guy." I leaned back on the railing to stretch my back. "And an idiot. Yeah, in both ways. The park's owner was Abel Bassetti." "Abel Bassetti? Is he related to that French billionaire, I'm guessing?" Brandon nodded. "Michael Bassetti. He built this park for his son back in the 70s. Abel was never really business savvy. People always said he was pretty simple. Can't believe the son of a billionaire lived here." "Well, not anymore. He moved out a long time ago. I shook my head, unable to process it. Who would have ever guessed that our little, humble park was owned by the son of a famous billionaire? Heck, I might have even sat next to him on a ride without ever realizing it. "Anyone want to go again?" Brandon called out as the ride came to a stop once more. "I'm ready to move on," Koji shouted back. "Anyone else?" A chorus of groans followed. It was nearly 5 p.m. by the time we finally made it to Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began its descent, a familiar wave of panic and excitement rose in the pit of my stomach. It took a moment before I realized that this time we didn't have to leave when the park closed. The park didn't have a closing time anymore. We could stay as long as we wanted, even until the sun came up if we felt like it. As I eagerly walked up to the turnstile for Mayhem Mountain, Tyler spoke from behind me. "Hey, can we run into town and grab something to eat before riding Mayhem?" "You really want to eat and then ride Mayhem?" I asked. "Good point," he replied. "It's got only one loop." "Two," I corrected him. "Right. Don't forget the inline roll," he agreed. "Yep, 2 loops. Plus, it's a 2-minute ride. If your stomach's not settled, it'll be a rough wait until it's done." "All right, let's ride it a few times, then grab food afterward. We'll see how we feel when we get back." Everyone nodded in agreement, and we headed towards the platform. As we reached the loading dock, I was thrilled to see our favorite green car waiting on the track. "Front seat!" Brandon and I shouted together as the train car came into view, and a collective groan erupted from the others behind us. "I'll stay here. I'll work the launch pad," Charlotte called out. "Still scared after all these years, Char?" I teased. "Shut up, Burnout," she shot back, laughing. Scott chuckled, ruffled her hair, and ran to jump into the first car behind Brandon and me. Danny slid in next to him, followed by Tyler and Koji, who took the second car. We pulled down the shoulder restraints, locking them in place. "Ready?" Brandon yelled. "Yep," I called back. "Send it!" Charlotte shouted, pulling the lever, and the brakes released. As the car began to roll forward, I turned to Brandon. "Did we get the green car on purpose?" I asked over the sound of the ride. "Yeah," he yelled back. "We sent cars through all morning, but I made sure Rich kept the green one in the loading bay for us." "Awesome!" I grinned as the train climbed up the first lift hill. My excitement was barely contained. I gazed over the sprawling park and couldn't believe that all of it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every screw. From the entrance gate to the overflow parking lot in the back, it was all ours. How I wished I could go back in time and tell the younger me, standing in that 2-hour line for Mayhem Mountain, that one day I'd own this place. As we reached the top of the hill, the train plummeted into the first drop. I realized I had, in a way, traveled back in time. At least I was screaming like a 12-year-old again, just like everyone else behind me. We flew over the first drop, then banked sharply as we climbed to the second lift hill. After that, we plummeted again, diving into the vertical loop, twisting around a series of gift shops, briefly climbing before dropping down a small hill, and finally hitting the inline roll. When we pulled back into the station, all of us were screaming and laughing in excitement. Charlotte didn't need to ask. She simply flashed a grin and sent us through again. We rode it twice more before finally deciding to get off. Koji wandered over to inspect the control panel while the rest of us started teasing my sister. "You sure you don't want to ride, Char?" It's incredible, I called out. Nah, I'm fine. I'm happy being the carny for this one, she shot back. Come on, just one time, one ride, and we'll leave you alone, I begged. No, 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 not happening. Not interested. I'll ride anything else, though, she replied firmly. Hey, do you guys know what Track B is? Koji suddenly asked. Track B? What are you talking about? Brandon walked over to join Koji by the control board, raising an eyebrow. Huh, that's strange, he muttered. It's probably just the track they use to park the cars, Scott suggested, shrugging. No, that's called a transfer track. Track B has to be something different, Koji disagreed. Well, I've been on this ride enough times to know there's no other track, Brandon said, shaking his head. Yeah, he's been on it, I added. So, what do we do? Try it? Hell no, Brandon quickly responded. If we don't know what Track B is, then the contractors don't either. And that means it hasn't been inspected in at least 2 decades, Koji said, his face going serious. That's basically asking for disaster. Look, if there really was a Track B, then even the worst engineer on Earth would have noticed it during an inspection. And Rich already signed off on the entire ride. It's probably just the track set to run backward. We're fine. We're doing this, Scott announced from across the rails, though Danny didn't look entirely convinced. Mark? Yeah, why not? I replied. What's the worst-case scenario? We end up parked in a service bay? Exactly. Tyler gave in with a shrug. I'm game too. Well, here goes nothing, Koji muttered. He switched the control to Track B, and within seconds, a grinding metallic noise echoed from somewhere deeper in the park. It went on for nearly a minute. I stared at the coaster's shiny frame beneath the sky glowing with fading light, but there was no visible difference. I looked at Brandon. He lifted his shoulders in the same confusion. Shall we? Scott asked, motioning toward the same train we'd just exited. I looked to Charlotte for a signal, but she quickly shook her head in protest. So, it was just us 6 again. It's only fair the captains take point, Tyler grinned, offering a playful salute. Oh, captains, my captains. I snorted and dropped into the front row's right-hand seat. Brandon climbed in beside me. Tyler and Koji sat directly behind us, and Scott and Danny filled in the last row. We locked in our shoulder harnesses with a solid click. Are you really sure about this? Charlotte called out once we were all settled. Danny mumbled something from the rear, but the only thing I heard clearly was Brandon yelling, "Hit it!" The safety locks disengaged, and we began rolling forward into the fading light. The area where we'd been standing moments ago was now bathed in soft, glowing lights, and the coaster looked nothing short of magical. A wave of emotion swept over me, a mix of pride and wonder at what this place meant for all of us. It stood as a monument to everything good about being young, the fun, the freedom, the moments untouched by anything serious. It was like our own private world. We started climbing the first hill again, and Brandon and I watched the track carefully from the peak, but nothing appeared to be different. He glanced at me, and I answered with a disappointed shake of my head. By the time we reached the vertical loop at the ride's midpoint, it was obvious. There was no alternate Track B. But that didn't matter much. I was still riding Mayhem Mountain, and resisting a grin was still completely impossible. We curved around the now brilliantly illuminated souvenir shops, over the short preview hill, then dipped back down, heading toward what should have been the inline roll. But the roll was above us now. We had completely bypassed it. Instead, the track dove straight into a huge square pit behind the shops, and we were barreling right into it. I was too stunned to shout or even flinch. The dark opening devoured us instantly, plunging us into absolute blackness. I felt the snug grip on my shoulders vanish and realized the restraints had disengaged. I clung tightly to the edge of my seat, while behind me, my friend's screams rang out in panic as the coaster suddenly spun into what seemed to be an inverted roll. I was frozen in fear, gripping the seat with everything I had. Part of my mind reasoned that the G-forces from the maneuver might be enough to keep me secured, even if I did lose my grip. Hopefully. We came out of the twist and plummeted once more. As we hit the drop, the space around us lit up, revealing the track rising into another test hill. At the hill's base, the restraints clamped back down on us with a mechanical thud. The ride sailed over a small bump, then braked as it prepared for another tall climb. I finally inhaled deeply for the first time since our plunge underground, tuning out Danny's and Tyler's shouts echoing behind me. We were now in what could only be called a massive subterranean chamber, likely stretching out beneath the entire park. It was filled with towering loops, plunging descents, and steep bends where the track twisted nearly vertical. The walls were lined with old lamps spaced every 30 feet or so. They cast a dim, lifeless yellow glow, just barely illuminating the space ahead. Many were broken, and in some sections, the track just vanished into darkness. But at the edge of one of those fading yellow halos, I spotted something that filled me with dread far worse than death. In the distance, on a shrouded portion of the track, I glimpsed a towering peak nearly reaching the ceiling, only for the rails to stop abruptly. That's when reality outside my mind began to pierce through. Danny was shrieking without pause. Tyler was sobbing loudly. Koji was shouting at Brandon, who stared at me with wild eyes, smacking my leg and repeating my name. As the train continued to climb, I finally acknowledged him. I didn't want to face this fear alone anymore. "What?" was all I could manage. "We have to get off this ride. We have to get off now, Mark." "I know, man," I screamed as we crested the top and plunged over the edge again. I shut my eyes tight as the bars lifted once more and bit down hard to keep from weeping. When I opened them again, I gasped in horror as the rails curled upward into a vertical loop. I reached up and tried pulling the restraint back down, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked solid. "Hold on, grab the seats and don't let go." As we neared the loop, I could feel the brakes engage, slowing us down, and a tow cable locking in near my feet. The ride was pulling us into the loop, but at a crawl, far too slow for gravity to pin us to our seats. As the train flipped upward, I felt my feet lift from the floor. My hair slipped over my eyes as my body rose from the seat. I shut my eyes tightly, trying to shut out the panicked cries echoing behind me. I focused all my strength into clutching the seat's edge with a desperate grip as we curved around the loop. We dangled upside down for what felt like an endless stretch of time. At last, the pressure gave way, my body sank back into the seat, and my feet returned to the floor. The ringing in my ears faded, and I heard Koji yelling, "Tyler, no, he's gone. He fell. He's dead, man. He's dead. He hit the rails down there," Brandon shouted, his eyes wide, his face frantic. I was finally seeing the old Brandon I remembered from childhood. The restraints snapped down again, even tighter this time. We exited the loop and dashed over and under a series of test hills. I tried to observe the path ahead during these less chaotic stretches. I thought I spotted glimmers, reflections of water shimmering off the metal tracks in the distance. Brandon was sobbing in his seat. "Mark, what do we do? I don't want to die like this. I don't want to die. I don't know. I have no idea what to do. I'm sorry. I'm terrified too." We curved around a bend in the cavern, and again the shoulder bars unlocked. This time, we plunged into a sideways twist that tipped the car so its side was nearly flush with the ground, and it was a steep, long drop. I latched onto the seat's ledge like before, but kept my eyes wide open, managing to grab Brandon as he began to slide from his seat. By the time we leveled out, I couldn't tell who else might have been lost. Most of the cries behind me had faded into weeping or chilling silence. The restraint didn't snap down again, and I felt the train slow once more. I didn't need to turn to guess what was next. Another loop loomed. This one was larger, towering, and I knew we'd be suspended upside down even longer. A scream pierced the air behind me. "Danny," I thought as I tried to inhale slow, controlled breaths and shift my aching back beneath the seat's edge. Brandon mimicked my movement and glanced at me as the train began to ascend the loop, tears streaking his cheeks. "I don't want to die in here, man." I shook my head at him, unable to form words. Tears welled up in my eyes as we approached the loop's crest, my feet lifting once again. Before we even hit full inversion, I could feel myself beginning to slide down the seat. I figured if I couldn't hold on, maybe I'd be able to grab the shoulder restraints once I slipped from the car. The ride suddenly halted, and I opened my eyes to realize we were entirely upside down. I groaned, the pain and strain of clinging to my seat overwhelming. The car crept forward again, and I heard Brandon say something from behind. I turned just in time to see him slide from his seat. One moment he was beside me, the next he was plunging, drifting further away. I saw him reach for the shoulder bar as he fell, but his grip failed. I watched helplessly as he plummeted, his back snapping on the tracks below. He stopped moving. I kept staring as the car slowly carried me around the loop, and he looked back at me, lifeless or barely holding on. By the time we exited the loop, the car ran him over, sealing his fate. The restraints clamped down again, and then a long, dreadful pause began. We stayed buckled in as the coaster rocketed over humps, twisted banks, and even flipped in a barrel roll. As the adrenaline drained from me, a creeping dread took hold. My mind raced with panic and terror stronger than anything I'd ever felt. I realized that this stretch of the ride was designed not to thrill, but to crush us with fear. Eventually, the brakes kicked in again, and I looked up, expecting another loop, but none appeared. We were way up high, nearly brushing the ceiling, slowing to a stop on a flat segment. Just ahead, a steep drop led to 4 distinct tracks, each marked by 5-foot swaths of color, red, orange, green, and blue, before veering off in separate directions. Suddenly, Koji grabbed my shoulder and shook me. "Which one are we on?" I twisted around to look at the switching mechanism. Green. Where does the green one lead? I traced the green rails with my eyes, losing and picking it up again as it weaved through the building. I couldn't be certain, but it seemed to finish at the lift hill I'd noticed earlier, the one with no track at the top. "It ends there," I shouted to him and pointed. Danny sobbed harder. While the ride paused, I massaged my aching hands together. That's when I spotted something strange. A small blinking panel had flipped open on the front wall of the car. It displayed 4 buttons, each colored, and a worn-out analog countdown. The timer was old, the display so faded I couldn't tell how much time we had left. "We have to decide," I told them, describing what I saw. "Can anyone figure out where the other tracks go?" I scanned the rails again, trying to follow them, but they tangled and crisscrossed too much to be sure. It was nearly impossible to tell where each path led. I had a feeling the blue track ended in that large pool tucked in the corner. The red one seemed to crash directly into a wall, and I guessed the orange descended into another shaft in the floor, like the one we came down through. "There's no escape, man," Scott called from the second car. His tone was disturbingly even. "This is just their way of letting us know how we're going to meet our end." "There's still a chance," I murmured, more for myself than for him. "Go for the pool," Scott replied, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've heard drowning isn't the worst way to go. Supposedly, it's peaceful near the end." "No, take the one that drops. Maybe it leads to another chamber like this one. It might have more track, which means more time, more chances to find a way out." "Do you really believe we'd be the first ones to pick that path? Nobody who vanished ever came back. There's only more death down that shaft. I don't want this to be the way I go, but at least the drop gives us a slim possibility." Danny kept sobbing in the back, offering no opinion of his own. It looked like the final decision was mine to make, and time was running out. I knew I didn't want to fall to my death. I didn't want to drown either. Maybe crashing into a wall was the fastest way to go. Most likely, it would be instant. Less pain, less time to dwell on the inevitable. But the truth was, I couldn't be totally sure which color led where. It was all based on instinct and scattered visuals, and my time had run out. Orange. Let's see if there's another level below. Neither Scott nor Danny replied, and Koji barely managed the final words I'd ever hear from him. "Please, press it before the system makes the choice for us." Without letting myself second guess, I slammed the orange button, sealing our fate with it. Below, the mechanism clanked as the track began to shift. Once the orange line locked into place, the brakes on our car released, and we started drifting toward the plunge. Danny's cries rose again. As we descended, I caught a clearer look at the orange route. Ahead stood a loop, not as towering as the others we'd faced. In fact, it almost seemed like surviving the fall was possible. And if the restraints gave out at the right moment, maybe, just maybe, we still had a chance. I shouted back at everyone behind me, "Let yourselves drop out of the loop, that one up top." No one said a word in response, though it didn't really matter. I wasn't sure I'd be brave enough to release my grip from the seat either. The train sped forward, banking sharply and twisting through curves. At one moment, we passed the pool, and I looked down. Beneath the surface, the track terminated above a darker, deeper basin. At the bottom, I could make out the silhouettes of several coaster cars. Then the brakes began to engage, and I realized we were nearing the loop. I pressed against the shoulder restraint to test it, but it stayed locked. For a second, I felt oddly thankful. I wouldn't have to choose between letting go now or continuing down the orange track. But without warning, the harness snapped open. As we ascended the loop, I clung hard to the edge of my seat and turned my head to glance downward. We were extremely high, and I prayed the ground below was as soft and loose as it had seemed. I had to make my choice now, plummet or continue through the hole. I went with the fall. Sliding upward in my seat, I yelled again, urging the others to let go and fall with me. Then I shut my eyes and released my grip. My head struck the bar on the way out. It wasn't some slow-motion drop. It ended before I even realized I'd let go. 1 second brought sharp pain from hitting the bar, and the very next I was lying on the ground. I hadn't even processed the danger of striking the track below or getting crushed by the train. I opened my eyes just in time to see the cars speeding overhead. The pain didn't rush in instantly. There was a short, almost peaceful second before it surged in. Then came pure torment. I'd wished my body might be so overwhelmed it would numb itself, but I felt everything. I focused hard on staying awake, trying to mentally assess the injuries. Blood soaked parts of my clothes, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I also heard screaming, maybe in my head, or maybe it was my friends nearing the ride's end. I didn't want to move, knew it might be dangerous, but I had to, at least to get my phone. With shaking hands, I fished it out of my pocket and raised it to my face, straining to see the screen, but it was shattered and lifeless. I tossed it aside, then noticed the silence. Their ride was over. Summoning all the strength I had, I rolled to my stomach and began dragging my battered body across the ground, aiming for the place I remembered the hole being. I crawled for what felt like forever. Maybe it was. A few times I tried to stand or even get to my knees, but the agony in my ribs and spine was too much. I blacked out more than once from the shock and pain, but somehow I reached the point where the rails vanished beneath the earth. I dragged myself to the edge and peered into the opening. The tracks cut off just beneath the surface. It was a natural pit, its walls carved from solid rock. I couldn't guess how far it went down, and I didn't care to know. I had barely avoided falling in myself, but then I remembered my friends might be down there. Maybe someone had survived. "Koji!" My shout echoed harshly down the shaft. Nothing. "Scott!" I grabbed a small bolt nearby and let it fall into the void. It took nearly 30 seconds to hit bottom, landing with a faint metallic ping. The quiet noise traveled back up, bouncing around the walls and filling the massive chamber, and I realized the whole place had been engineered for sound. I rolled onto my back and took in as much of the area as my position allowed. Fighting the pull of unconsciousness again, I felt a cold stillness wash over me as my eyes found what I'd been searching for. On the far wall, a wide observation window stretched across. I finally understood the purpose of Track B, and with that, I gave in to the blackness. I barely recall my rescue. There were uniforms, my sister's voice crying out, and overwhelming pain. During the ambulance ride, I drifted in and out of awareness, but at one moment, I passed through the room behind that long glass, and from my stretcher, amidst all the chaos, I saw a single chair facing the window. It was buried under years of dust. No official ever contacted me. No one asked for a statement. Charlotte never left my side through my hospital stay, staying for months as I healed. She rarely spoke of what happened, but eventually shared something. She said they hadn't let her ride along with me to the hospital, but someone offered her a lift. During that ride, She spoke with two strangers who persuaded her to stay silent about the events, and to make sure I stayed silent too. Whatever they said frightened her into pleading with me to promise, and I did. I'm still relearning how to walk on my own. I never returned to Mayhem Mountain. The loan went unpaid, and Adventure Valley was taken over by a faceless corporation that razed it and built a set of apartment buildings in its place. They remain unoccupied to this day. I can't stand the dark anymore. It brings back the terror my friends must have felt as they stared at the disappearing track beneath them. I try not to imagine their final moments, falling helplessly into the shadows, trapped on that ride, waiting for what came next. I often wished I'd picked the swimming pool instead, if only to spare them from what happened. As for the billionaire's kid, he wasn't foolish, just someone who preferred the simpler things in life. And that hasn't changed. I looked him up once, not that long ago. He now owns multiple theme parks, each a decent size, but only really known in the areas they're based. Interestingly, one of them is pretty close to where I currently live. I've thought about visiting more than once, just to get a look, just to see for myself. But then it hit me. I wouldn't need to walk through every inch of that park to find out. I already knew. Somewhere hidden away in a quiet part of that place, there's a ride that has its own Track B. Hey everyone, I hope all is good with you. I'm sorry I've been absent for a while and haven't posted much recently. Life's been a bit chaotic, and I won't go into all the details, but a few things have been going on. Plus, I've run into a lot of obstacles with my stories lately. I think I talked about that in a recent compilation, but it honestly felt like one problem after another, and that wore me down. It definitely played a part in why it's taken me so long to get back into the groove. But I'm in a better place now. I'm pumped about the new videos I've started working on. One thing I plan to change moving forward is I won't really share much about what's in progress anymore, just because I know stuff happens, delays come up, and it sucks to say something's coming next week only for it not to happen. So from now on, I'll only mention projects when they're basically finished. That way, I won't disappoint anyone, including myself. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story. It was written by C.K. Walker, who also created Baraska. What I really liked about this one was how it gave off that old-school creepypasta vibe, kind of like Abandoned by Disney. It was a lot of fun working on the sound effects for this one too, especially since I rarely get the chance to play with roller coaster sounds and that sort of thing. I'm really excited to hear what you all think. I'm going to take some extra time today to chill in the comment section just so I can respond to as many of you as possible. I know I've been a bit MIA lately, so I really want to reconnect. So if you leave a comment, I'll make sure to reply. That said, I hope you all have an awesome day.